Welcome back to another episode of Lost in the Farmer's Market Garden Shorts. Now, this episode, our plant specimen's not that great, but that's because I started harvesting the specimen before thinking, hey, make a video out of this. This will be the subject of a redux next year when I redo this episode, so don't worry about it. In the meanwhile, today's episode is about what you see before you, the common sweet potato. Now, its scientific name is Ipomoea batatas. Now, that's an interesting name because it tells you quite a bit. Batata is the Taino name for the tuber. That's a South American culture, mind you. It's in the family Convolvaceae, which is the morning glory family. That's right, your common sweet potato is actually related to morning glories. However, it is also related to a bunch of other things as a result of that. We know about morning glories themselves, but they're also related to dichandra, that weird sort of Pac-Man leaf-shaped green stuff that sometimes is used as ground cover. Sometimes it's considered a weed, sometimes not so much. Not to be confused with coltsfoot, which is a different thing. It's also related to the parasitic vine known as dodder. Now, dodder is fascinating. In fact, the whole family is fascinating. It's full of neat plants and bushes and things that all have a similar flower and a similar morphology. Dodder is a parasite. It's an annual parasite that basically germinates, has basically what passes for a root until it can get close enough to another plant, which it uses either chemical cues or heliotropism or phototropism to find, and then it latches on and it injects these little things called Dioscorea, basically roots, into the other plant to leach off nutrients and fluids. Then it drops its root and it grows all over the plant, and it ends up looking like, you remember that silly string in a can when you were a kid? It looks like someone barfed a buttload of that all over the plant. Kinda cool, but it's an agricultural pest. Fascinating from a biological perspective that a plant could be that parasitic. But then again, so is mistletoe. So, Now, as you might have figured, sweet potato is native to South and Central America, so it's a New World food. Go New World! It's perennial in USDA zones 9 through 12, and it might be a perennial with some protection in 8 through 7, particularly 8. We're 8A here, so woo! Subtropical forever! It prefers the soil pH of 5 to 7.5, roughly speaking. Its exposure, it prefers full sun, but is okay with partial shade. Its height can be 4 to 6 inches, but its spread can be 3 to 4 feet across the ground, at which at certain intervals it will drop roots and produce more tubers, which you see right here where I'm pointing with the stick of doom. And this tuber here is actually the original tuber that grew these guys. Amazing. This not so happy specimen is a chunk of the stem that I decided to preserve because I saw it was growing roots, and you can't quite see it, but in the cup there, it's growing a root right now. In fact, let's zoom in for a moment and see what we got. We're zooming in. Okay. Now, you see that stringy thing in there right about here? That's actually a root that's grown in the last week since I made the mistake of harvesting this without doing the episode first. So, sweet potatoes, if kept from frost, can be perennials. Gotta love it. This chunk of stem here, this is a piece I took off the mass that's drying in the sun so I can dispose of it to show kind of what the leaves are like. Now, if you notice, the leaves are kind of heart-shaped, which is neat. Now, that's just the beginning. Do any of you remember when I talked about how beets and Swiss chard are actually the same plant? Do you remember that? They share the same scientific name, Beta vulgare, because effectively they're genetically indistinguishable except for one little detail. One makes a root, and one focuses on the root, and one focuses on the shoots. Well, sweet potatoes, Ipomoea batata, has the same scientific name as sweet potato vines, Ipomoea batata. They're genetically identical, give or take, except, and actually sweet potato vines, if grown long enough, will produce pasty, sort of gamey tubers, which is great if you're desperate. So, survival food, definitely. Now it gets better than that, you see. What's fascinating about that is that name, batata, now I already mentioned that is from Taino, and I am probably mispronouncing that. That's spelled T-A-I-N-O. So if any of y'all out there know exactly how to pronounce that, please leave a comment. But I digress. Well, sweet potatoes have a bunch of common names. Sometimes we in North America call them yams, but they're also known as camote with a K as opposed to a C, and kumar, depending on areas of Asia, South America, the islands, you name it. They've got a slew of names, which is fascinating, at least to me anyway. What's interesting though is that the actual yam is in an entirely different family, is entirely unrelated, and at some point we'll cover the for real deal yam, which is again, I didn't note the scientific name, but we'll cover that in a later video, because why the hell not? Now, we're going to move on to the next thing, the history. The first Europeans to have eaten sweet potatoes were members of Columbus's crew in 1492. Now, we don't really have any concrete evidence other than saying they ate some weird tubers, because by then this plant had been spread to the Caribbean and so forth. They have some records, but Europeans have been visiting the North Americas in one form or another since, Leif Erikson landed here. We have no idea if they encountered it or not, because written records don't exist, except for Columbus's, and possibly some other voyagers who may have named it, or their records may have been lost. The most commonly grown variety is Beauregard. Now, I think you know that one, because you'll often see Beauregard starts sold under the Bonnie label. Now, again, that's not a plug. Bonnie doesn't sell quality, but that's a totally different thing. I have to do a special video for why that's the case. Beauregard was developed in Louisiana in 1981. It is the dominant type grown in Australia. 90% of their agricultural crop is Beauregard, and that's the traditional orange type, and that's actually what you see before you. These here are Beauregard tubers. That's a Beauregard start. Well, you get the joke. Also, consequently, 1981 was the year I was born, so yay, tubers! Development of the most important sweet potato tuber, and development of this weirdo. Now, medicinally speaking, and again, disclaimer alert, if you're intending to use herbal substances or vegetables to treat medical ailments, I do recommend you consult a properly credentialed individual like a doctor or someone who knows their stuff and has the degrees and certifications to back it up. Don't consult that crazy guy wearing a paper bag for a hat on the corner. Now, supposedly, sweet potatoes may have cancer-fighting properties, may enhance brain function, may reduce a bunch of ailments. The list goes on, and therein lay the problem with the Weber nets. If it's on the Weber nets, you need to take it with a giant grain of salt. Now, they do agree on the cancer fighting and the brain function, but the other things like helping expel the kidneys, blah, 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 not so sure. People claim, various sites are claiming different things. Medical studies claim certain things, and the two I listed are the ones they tend to agree on. However, enhanced brain function and cancer fighting, that comes from a specific point of reference. Nutrition. Healthy people get less diseases. It's simple as that. The average American has a crappy diet. But sweet potatoes might fix some of that. Now here's their nutrition per 133 grams. Are y'all ready for this? Sodium, 73 milligrams. Potassium, 488 milligrams. To hell with bananas! Carbohydrates, 27 grams. Protein, 2.1 grams. Now, of your daily value of vitamins and nutrients, vitamin A, 377%. Holy crap balls! That's a lot of vitamin A! Vitamin C, 5%. Calcium, 4%. Iron, 4%. B6, 15%. Magnesium, 8%. Incredible edible tubers. It's amazing. I had to check that number on the vitamin A like 3 times. I was like, there's no way. Oh, USDA says it's true. Hey, who knew? These tubers right here. No wonder these are an important crop, especially in the warmer climates. Now, I'm going to point out an interesting thing for culture and care of these plants. They respond well to fertilizer. If you grow them in pots, don't be surprised at the end of the season if you see bulges in the pots where the tubers are using hydraulic force to push against the container walls. They may bust thin-walled pots. Don't worry, that's normal. It's actually really kind of cool. I mean, bias alert. If you're going to grow these in pots, you're going to need at least a 14-inch diameter pot, i.e. a tree pot, a small tree pot or something bigger. They will fill it, not with tubers, but they'll fill it out. The vines, as I mentioned, can spread up to 3 to 4 feet in all directions. They may produce tubers wherever those vines touch ground, so you need 3 or 4 feet on center of spacing. So these suckers will produce. They will respond to fertilizer, specifically liquid fertilizer. And in the case here, this is the starting tuber, and these are the tubers produced. Now, they're not as pretty as the ones at the supermarket, but they're homegrown. F the supermarket. Now, this starting tuber here, this weighed 6 ounces when I planted it. It gained 2 ounces, is now 8 and some change. But it produced 28 ounces of tubers in a singular 14-inch pot with no chance for the stems to root and produce more tubers. That's an oopsie on my part, but it highlights what you should think about doing. I plant these in pots so I can get to the tubers easily. But if I had clustered a bunch of 14-inch pots together and then aimed the stems into the 14-inch pots by weighing them down with rocks or something, or landscaping pins, I could have quadrupled or sextupled my productivity. This may be the wave of the future, folks. So, think about that. Oh, one other thing. I did not mention the exposure. Well, I did, but full sun is definitely preferred. Most fields I see are out in the full sun. I grow mine in partial to ease on watering. However, do yo thing. How you need to do yo thing. And that's about all I have for you on sweet potatoes. Again, this episode will be reduxed later on when I have an actual lively plant to show you instead of the chopped up remains of a plant. Yeah. It's playing a little tiny horticultural violin. I digress. So, if you like this episode, please hit the like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell me what you'd like to hear, what you didn't like to hear. I love to hear back from you folks, and don't worry, we're going to keep them growing. Have a good day, folks.